I saw images from downtown Toronto yesterday, tens of thousands of people, really the biggest hate march in Canadian history. It doesn't feel like Canada.
It's definitely not the Canada that I grew up in at all.
Do you think there's a political stomach in this country to deport some people, especially if they're not citizens yet?
Get rid of them.
Can you bring yourself to say stop immigration, or are you too liberal?
I wouldn't even, I'm not liberal at all, but I wouldn't say we shouldn't allow people from anti-Semitic countries. We shouldn't allow people who go against our Western values.
Instead of continuously bringing more people in right now when everything is out of control, I think we need to pause, take a step back, and figure out what's going on before we just keep bringing thousands and thousands and thousands of more people in when we've seen what that's done to our country and our economy.
I think a lot of people who came here who fled the pogroms and were raised with that, it's hard to do a blanket statement against all immigrants.
But now we're bringing in the people who support the pogroms. Ezra Levant here for Rebel News. At the conclusion of the one-year vigil in Toronto for the October 7th massacre in southern Israel, the largest murder of Jews since the Holocaust. Behind me, a choir from Israel is singing at the conclusion of the event. It was hard for me to judge from the inside whether there were 10,000 people here or 20,000, but it was an enormous affair. Very high security on the way in. Metal detectors, police drones and helicopters, riot squads, a patrol, not just because of the terrorist attacks overseas, but because of pro-Hamas provocateurs in this country, most of whom, as we have since learned, are arranged and directed by Iran, which has 700 agents in Canada, according to an investigative report by Global News. What's interesting about this event tonight is that no politicians spoke. I saw Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, he was here, and Kevin Vuong, the independent MP from Toronto, but none of them were speaking. There were victims and family members of victims, and there was singing, and it was a non-political affair. And I think that was probably a good thing. There would have been some tremendous booing had any establishment politicians been here. Not that Olivia Chow would come, and Justin Trudeau would never come. His cabinet minister, Ya'ara Sachs, who represents this district, she would surely have been booed. Remember, she flew to Ramallah to meet with the terrorist Mahmoud Abbas and has never renounced or disavowed that. What a bizarre move by her. I'll show you some snippets, some excerpts from the evening, but there were no politics, just speeches. But I want to show you about a dozen little streeter interviews I did with the people here. Look, we're in Jewish Toronto. That used to translate into loyal liberal voters. In fact, I'm embarrassed to say that a member of the Jewish tribe, Stephen Bronfman, remains Justin Trudeau's chief fundraiser, even through his entire pro-Hamas binge. But I spoke to probably a dozen people here, and I asked each of them, are you ready to give up your liberal ways of inviting in mass immigration? Because, by the way, that's who's marching in these pro-Hamas rallies in Toronto. It's not old stock Canadians. It's the woke university set, and they're a problem, the Fred Hans of this world. But most of the people threatening Jews, uttering death threats, causing mischief and trespass, and parading in masks and smoke bombs, calling for the genocide of Jews, they're not Canadian. They were brought here by Trudeau. And unless we shut off the tap, you're not going to solve this problem if you allow in 2 million migrants a year from countries where anti-Semitism is endemic. It's just not going to happen. Jews will be first, but they won't be last. They come for the Christians first. They'll come for the Jews first. They'll go for the Christians second. I remind you that the great city of Istanbul was once called Constantinople. Empires rise and fall. The Roman Empire, the British Empire, and a dozen more in between. But the most colonizing force in the world today is radical Islam. starting in Saudi Arabia, dominating Northern Africa, parts of Asia, and now many neighborhoods in London, Toronto, Montreal, and other places. This is a civilizational battle. If you doubt me, just read a bit of history. That's not to say there aren't wonderful people from Muslim lands. Some of the greatest freedom fighters are from there. Tonight, I interviewed a fellow from Iran who despises the Islamists who have dominated his country for decades. We have to find allies within the Muslim community and strengthen them. And we have to denounce and banish the authoritarians and Islamic fascists amongst them. Here's some of my streeters from earlier today. Hi, why are you guys here today?
To support our community because we love Israel.
And why are you here?
Why is everybody here?
I don't know.
I'm here to mourn the loss of Jewish lives, the desecration of the Jewish state, and the hatred that was unleashed against the Jews.
Do you think we'll have the mayor of Toronto, the premier of Ontario, or the prime minister of Canada here today?
Definitely not the Prime Minister.
Why are you here?
To remember, to be angry, to support. That's it.
A moment ago, you were telling me that you were actually considering leaving Canada. Is that true?
Oh, absolutely.
Over the anti-Semitism?
Yes.
Why?
This whole country is different than it was 20 years ago. Completely different. The only reason, well, one of the reasons why we've held back is if Kamala Harris is elected, we're not going to go live there. But it's a different demographic. You mentioned immigration earlier. I mean, I think there's a lot of dormant anti-Semitism that has just been validated and allowed to wake up, and our political leaders are just sitting on their heinies and allowing it to happen. And it's vulgar. It's frightening. I think there's a tremendous number of Jews who are thinking precisely this. Wherever they go. And honestly, the number of countries is reducing. And it might not be the United States by November.
Hi, what's your name?
I'm Topaz.
And what's your shirt?
This is Omer Shemtov. He's 22 years old and he was kidnapped from the Nova Festival. He's still in Gaza. We've heard about what it was like for him in Gaza up until 54 days because two of the people he was with, Maya and Itai Regev, came back. And he has celiac disease and asthma. And he's still there for a year now, and his parents and his siblings really want him home. So if you could keep him and everyone else in your prayers, they'd really appreciate some love from Canada and to educate yourselves on their stories.
Why are you here today?
Because we can never forget what happened on October 7th, and because it's still going, and because there needs to be advocacy, and we have to still keep talking about the hostages until they're home.
Hey, can I talk to you about your flag?
Flag for Iran.
Yeah, tell me a little bit. I mean, I see a lot of Persians, a lot of people who are from Iran who believe in freedom coming to these events. Can you explain why that is?
We stand with Israel people. We love Israel people. We have a lot of culture mixed together. We have a big history together. And we stand for freedom, for Middle East be safe. Just about that. We need a safe Middle East in the peace.
I'm here to support Israel and to cry out to the world that they should care and that they should to know that anybody in any circumstance would want to bring their hostages home from any country. So it's a shout out to my Israeli friends who've witnessed murder firsthand. I'm here standing proud.
Why are you here today?
To support our nation.
Now, I see you have a maple leaf on your hats. I don't think they have a single maple leaf or Canadian flag at the pro-Hamas rallies in Canada. What does that tell you?
It tells me that they don't want to be here. They want to change us and our culture, and they should get out of here.
Well, let me follow up on that, because the Jewish community historically has been pro-immigration. And I think that immigrants form the majority of these hate marches. That's just my observation. I could be wrong. Do you think we have to reassess our mass immigration policy?
100%. If you see what's gone on, it's not the Canada I grew up in over the years.
Oh, did you see our truck about your RSX?
I did.
What do you think of that?
I thought it was terrific.
Now, why do you think she went and met with that terrorist leader? Because she's not the foreign minister, she's not the prime minister, she has no duties in that region. So why would she fly all the way there to pose with a terrorist?
I'm really not sure. Maybe she's wants a better ministry from Trudeau. I don't know.
Yeah, it's really weird. Do you think she'll show her face tonight?
I hope not.
Why are you here?
I'm here to support the Jewish community in Toronto and to commemorate the awful thing that happened last year on October 7th.
Now, do you think our political leaders will come here? Who do you expect? Mayor Chow, Premier Ford, Prime Minister Trudeau?
I would expect maybe Melissa Landsman, negative to all the others. Absolutely negative.
Now, why is that? The Jews have been in Toronto for centuries. They're in the highest places in the community. Why would our leaders abandon us in this time?
Ask Olivia Chow why she didn't stand up at the Solidarity rally when everybody else was asked to stand to rise from solidarity for Israel. There's your answer. And I think the others are all in the same group as her.
I mean, Israel has an army. It can take care of itself, I think. But here in Canada, I don't know who's standing up to the anti-Semitic crime wave.
Nobody is.
Why is that?
I don't know. Go ask Trudeau.
And why do you name Trudeau? Because there's also the mayor and the premier, too.
Yeah, you can go ask the mayor.
What do you think they should be doing?
I don't know.
I have a suggestion. You might not like it, though.
What is the suggestion?
Well, I think a lot of the anti-Semites marching in these hate marches are foreign immigrants who come from places where anti-Semitism is endemic. And I don't think you're going to see an end to this crime wave until we stop bringing in people who are anti-Semitic. I think we have to stop immigration. What do you think?
Oh, I don't know. I think the locals are doing pretty well, too.
Don't you have to cut off the taps of immigration if you want to solve this problem, really?
1,000%. I think everybody should be screened. Everyone should be properly, whatever you want to call it, to when they come into a country. If it was up to me, to be honest with you, anybody that was calling out for hate for anybody else would be on the next plane out of here, gone. I wouldn't put up with any of it because there's no call for any of this. People are just living normal lives, democratic, normal, progressive lives, and you don't go around just slaughtering people for no reason. That's not how life works. Everyone has to help each other. Everyone has to take care of one another and be respectful. And it's just really it's been a almost like a nightmare, this whole situation. And I think something has to be done about it. And if people don't stand together and play as a team, then we're not going to achieve anything.
I don't want to be partisan, but it is noticeable that Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives are taking a harder line on these issues, and especially Melissa Landsman, who's from the Greater Toronto Area, Thornhill. If Pierre Poilievre wins, as the polls suggest he might, what do you expect he will do? Not say, but do. Do you think he'll live up to his promise? And if so, what would that look like?
Well, I absolutely do. First of all, Conservatives often do what they say they will. And people who vote them in for that sometimes are surprised. Why are you doing that? I suspect he will. I mean, part of the answer is immigration. Part of the answer is changing the infrastructure at every level, provincial, federal, municipal, as to how this thing is managed. I think there'll be a very different tone and temperament when they're elected. It couldn't come soon enough.
Are you worried about what's happening here in our community in Canada? Are you worried about some of the pro-Hamas statements, some of the mass rallies?
It's obviously worrisome. I think it's more disappointing that this is where we are in 2024 and our education system has allowed for this to happen. But yeah, it's definitely worrisome, and this is how things start, and it's getting out of hand. It has been for a while, and the fact that we're allowing these protests to go on in such violent ways is worrisome. It's not going to just get better on its own, and we have to take action now before it's too late and change the future.
But what about the anti-Semitic crime wave here in Canada?
I have no words. I mean, are we talking about Canada? Or we're talking about Toronto? I think every level of government is complicit.
Complicit in what way? What are they doing or not doing?
Well, I think that the fact that there are anti-Israel protests happening in our streets, shutting down our streets on a regular basis, and Olivia Chow, as our mayor, is doing absolutely nothing when the Toronto police are being handcuffed to be able to actually enforce. The laws in Canada actually are there to protect and not allow what is going on right now. You're not allowed to protest with a mask on, and yet they are. You are not allowed to wave flags of terrorist groups, and they are. And so I start here at home. I mean, I won't get onto the federal level. I mean, I don't think I saw a comment from Justin Trudeau today on October 7th.
So tell me about your hat with the lion and your flag, because those are symbols about freedom in Iran.
Yeah.
Give me one word about that.
That's this flag for 83 years ago. That's made its flag. That's our traditional flag. This regime in Iran, the dictator regime, they change our flag with something that's, I don't know, Islamic word, but we don't like that. That's our flag, and we believe that, and we want and we need to have this flag in the next few years, maybe sooner than. We fight for that. We fight for back this flag to our country.
Can I ask you about the anti-Semitic crime wave here in Canada? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a direct, strategic part of the war effort in Gaza to mobilize people who are uneducated about what's happening in the Middle East, and to get people to react in a anti-Semitic way in Canada. And it's really a huge concern here. No violence. Hate has no home here in Canada. It should never be allowed here or ever in any parts of the world.
But it's here. And when people say that's not Canada, that's not who we are, you can only say that for so long before you have to say, well, actually that is maybe not who we are, but there's a significant pocket of people here. For a year, our politicians have been saying that's not who we are. But just over the weekend, there was the largest protest maybe in Canadian history for anti-Semitism. There was nothing like that during the 30s. So at what point do you say we have to actually do something instead of just say that's not who we are?
That's exactly why we're here. We're doing something about it. And it's also to recognize that 70% of all Canadians are silent majority of people who are supportive of against anti-Semitism, but they just haven't figured out the words in which to express it yet. That's what I believe.
Here in Canada, I don't think the country has come to grips with the crime wave, the anti-Semitic crime wave here. What do you think?
I think people here are blind. There's a lot of privilege that people have when they're here. The safety of being in a place where you're not surrounded by any countries that want to destroy you, by no one that really wants to harm you. And so people don't actually know what it means to be in danger. And so when they see the rise of this happening, it doesn't really do much for them. We know, we feel it every day, but no one else really does.
Now, you seem like a very reasonable woman. I'm going to guess you voted Liberal much of your life. I just have a hunch.
I did what my parents told me, but for many years, yes.
Well, Jews in Toronto, that sort of equals the Liberal Party. It's even more so in Montreal, but I got a question for you. I think one of the problems is mass immigration from countries where anti-Semitism is endemic. And I think that this problem is only going to get worse if we keep inviting people who hate Jews into Canada. Now, liberal Jews have generally been pro-immigration. How do you square that circle?
I'm really not sure. I think we need to put a kibosh on all of it, and these people who are coming to our country need to be vetted in a much better way.
Do you think Canadians have the stomach to deport foreign nationals?
Ask Trump.
And do you think Canada should take refugees from Gaza?
No.
And how about people from other anti-Semitic countries? And when I say anti-Semitic countries, I mean just places where anti-Semitism is the norm or official government policy. Can you bring yourself to say stop immigration, or are you too liberal?
I'm not liberal at all, but I wouldn't say we shouldn't allow people from anti-Semitic countries. We shouldn't allow people who go against our Western values.
Instead of continuously bringing more people in right now when everything is out of control, I think we need to pause, take a step back, and figure out what's going on before we just keep bringing thousands and thousands and thousands of more people in when we've seen what that's done to our country and our economy, and reevaluate how to take a hold on this instead of just bringing thousands of people in.
I'm going to guess, and I'm not, maybe I am stereotyping. I'm going to guess you are someone who in your past has voted liberal. And I think if I think of Toronto Jewish women, I think that's your liberal voter. And one of the things that the Liberal Party has stood for so long is big number immigration, hundreds of thousands or millions of people, no vetting for cultural fit, no integration. And what I would ask someone like you, who obviously deeply cares and is deeply concerned, can you vote for a party, or do you want a party that says stop the immigration and in fact deport some of these foreign hate mongers? Are you willing to do that, or are you still the happy Jewish Toronto woman from the 90s?
I've never voted liberal, and I am so proud to say that. I mean,
Okay, I'm sorry I stereotyped you.
And it's great because my
I
children will ask me, and I'll be like, we vote blue in our house. But I would also say it's very similar to what we see, what's going on with the Democratic Jews in the U.S. They're waking up to what's going on. There are many people that I know in the U.S. who have been Democrats their whole lives. And after October 7th, it took a different meaning. And we can no longer just sit on our laurels and vote the way that we always have.
I'm sorry I called you a liberal.
I'll forgive you.
My question to you, and this is my hardest question, are you willing to say we have to stop immigration? Because I think that as long as you have open borders immigration from places where they hate Jews and kill Jews, aren't you going to see that come here? And if you don't turn off the tap?
We have to always monitor what immigration looks like, always. That comes from the federal government, which is doing very little.
They're bringing in Gazans now, one of only 2 countries in the world crazy enough to do that. How do you feel about that?
Terrible. It's really bad.
Are you willing, as a Jewish woman in Toronto who's probably voted liberal before, are you willing to say you're against, maybe we should pause immigration? Can you bring yourself to say that? Or is that too illiberal for you?
Given that my grandparents were new immigrants here, it's hard for me to say that. I think a lot of people who came here who fled the pogroms and were raised with that, it's hard to do a blanket statement against all immigrants.
But now we're bringing in the people who support the pogroms, not those fleeing from them. Like, there's a difference between people fleeing violence and people coming to propose violence, isn't there?
Absolutely. That's why we have to have very strong policies when it comes to who is entering.
But we don't vet people at all.
That's the problem.
Well, when you let tens of thousands of people come into the country,
well, millions even.
Millions from anywhere, really, in places that are filled with terrorism and with people that hate Western society, what are they really expecting? And so it surprises a lot of people, but it really shouldn't when your borders are so open.
I saw images from downtown Toronto yesterday, tens of thousands of people, really the biggest hate march in Canadian history. It doesn't feel like Canada.
It's definitely not the Canada that I grew up in at all.
Do you think there's a political stomach in this country to deport some people, especially if they're not citizens yet?
Get rid of them.
What do you think about the idea to bring in people from Gaza?
Silly.
No, that's for sure. Do you think that the Jews are waking up to the threats of open borders immigration in Canada, or are they still the way they were in the 70s and 80s?
I hope they are. I hope that they're waking up. I mean, I've definitely met my fair share of liberal Jews. I think after October 7th, a number of them are leaving some of their liberal values. But I hope that they're able to open up and see that really that side doesn't care for them one way or another.
Well, that's my report from here in Toronto. Hopefully you can hear me over the band. I would estimate there were at least 10,000 souls here. I was glad to be amongst them. And it's been a year of war in Israel, but we are a front line here in Canada too. Every weekend people call for genocide and other violence. We have to wake up to that too. For Rebel News, I'm Ezra Levant. been covering the pro-Israel vigil in North Toronto. My colleagues at Rebel News have been covering the pro-Hamas protest at Queen's Park. You can see it all at rebelnews.com.